He grabbed her throat in open court, bailiff 3 steps away, judge on the bench. Every eye in courtroom 4B locked on what Deputy Derek Holt's hand was doing to the woman standing in front of him. She didn't move. Her files were still on the table, her briefcase still on the floor. Her eyes stayed level with his chest, calm the way deep water is calm, still on the surface, moving hard underneath. Holt's voice broke across the room. "This badge protects me. You understand that? This badge means I walk out of here and you don't." The room held its breath. Maya Underwood looked up at him, unhurried, the way a person looks when they already know something the other person doesn't. 3 words: check my title. Nobody in that courtroom moved. Then, from the gallery, a sound, low, steady, the kind of presence that fills a room before it speaks. 23 men in leather vests had been sitting in the back rows since 8:47 that morning. The largest of them, gray at the temples, iron-faced, a patch on his back that 3 deputies had already quietly photographed and run, stood up. Holt's hand dropped. What happened next? Nobody who was in that room has ever forgotten it. This is Heart Tales. Let's go back to the night it all began. Holt's hand dropped from her throat the moment the gallery shifted. He felt it before he heard it. 23 men moving at once has a specific weight. The air in courtroom 4B changed pressure the way a room changes when a door opens onto a storm. He stepped back. 1 step. Automatic. The kind of step a body takes before the mind catches up. Maya Underwood didn't move at all. She stood exactly where she had been standing, her blazer straight, her files still on the table. Her breathing even in a way that took everything she had to keep even, because her throat ached where his thumb had pressed, and she could feel the whole left side of her neck going tight and hot. She did not touch it. She did not look away from him. "Keep your eyes on him," she told herself. "The moment you look away, he thinks he's won." She kept her eyes on him. Judge Patricia Caldwell was on her feet behind the bench, gavel already down, the crack of it still ringing off the old oak walls. Deputy Holt. 1 sentence, 2 words. The voice of a woman who had spent 30 years in rooms like this one and had learned exactly how much volume was required to stop a man cold. Holt turned. Caldwell's eyes moved from him to Maya, back to him. The reading glasses had come off. She held them in one hand, the earpiece pinched between 2 fingers, and she looked at Holt the way a person looks at a stain they have found on something that was supposed to be clean. "You will sit down," she said. "Now." Beckett was already on his feet across the room, hand on Holt's arm, steering him back toward the plaintiff's table with the practiced efficiency of a man who had spent $420 an hour preventing exactly this kind of damage. He was whispering something low and quick. Holt's jaw worked. His face had gone a deep, uneven red, the red of a man whose certainty had just hit something solid and couldn't yet process what it was. He sat. The gallery did not sit. The 23 men in leather vests were standing. All of them. They hadn't moved toward the aisle, hadn't raised their voices, hadn't done anything that could be called a threat in any court of law. They had simply stood up, the way men stand when something has been done in front of them that cannot be allowed to go unwitnessed. The largest of them, gray at the temples, a jaw that looked like it had been set by a man who stopped flinching from things a long time ago, stood in the front row of the gallery, with his arms at his sides and his eyes on Holt. He had not looked at Maya once. He didn't need to. The patch on the back of his vest read Iron Covenant McKeek, in a half-moon arc above a centered skull and compass emblem. President running in a straight rocker along the bottom. 3 deputies in the back corner of the gallery had clocked it the moment he walked in. One of them had already run it quietly on his phone 40 minutes earlier, sitting in the back row with his arms crossed, waiting for a short hearing that was supposed to be over by noon. The search result had made him very still. Elias Underwood, 57 years old, President, Iron Covenant MC, Colton County Chapter. No active warrants, 1 expunged charge from 1991. Known associates listed 11 names, every one of them currently seated in this gallery. The deputy had not shared this information with Holt. Caldwell swept the room with one long look. The gallery, the plaintiff's table. The defendant standing alone in the center of the courtroom with her hand resting flat on the evidence rail, her files in order, her spine straight, her face carrying the particular expression of a woman who had already decided that what just happened was not going to slow her down by a single minute. "Ms. Underwood," Caldwell's voice had shifted, precise still, but something had moved underneath it. "Are you able to continue?" Maya turned to face the bench. "Yes, Your Honor." She said it the way people say things when they mean them completely. Caldwell looked at her for a long moment. Something passed between them, quieter and more specific than sympathy, more earned than admiration. The recognition of one woman who had learned to hold her ground in rooms that were not built for her, looking at another. She put her glasses back on. "Mr. Beckett." The neutrality in Caldwell's voice now had edges. "Control your client. If Deputy Holt touches the defendant again, or approaches within 6 feet of her table, I will have him removed from this courtroom, and this matter will proceed without him. Are we clear?" Beckett stood. "Crystal clear, Your Honor. My client deeply regrets—" "Sit down, Mr. Beckett." He sat. Holt stared at the table in front of him. His badge caught the fluorescent light and threw a small, bright point onto the ceiling above the jury box. A tiny star. He had polished it that morning in the parking lot of the Colton County Sheriff's Department, the way he had polished it every morning for 14 years. He had held it in his palm and felt the specific weight of it, the authority, the protection, the absolute certainty that it meant something permanent. He had been wrong about a lot of things. He was starting to understand that. Stay with me, because the story of how a middle-aged woman walked into courtroom 4B with 6 paper folders and a worn leather briefcase and took apart a 14-year career piece by piece. That story didn't start here. It started 3 months earlier, on a Tuesday evening, on a 2-lane road in Colton County, Georgia, where the pine trees grow close to the shoulder and the copper light sits low for exactly 40 minutes before the dark takes everything. 3 months earlier, Route 9, Colton County, Georgia, 6:43 in the evening. The light was doing what it always did that time of year, sitting low and copper over the pine line, turning everything it touched the color of old photographs. Maya Underwood had driven this road since she was 17 years old. She knew every curve of it, every shoulder where the gravel gave way to red clay, every mile marker between the county line and her mother's house on Sycamore Street. She had driven it in rain, in August heat that made the asphalt ripple, in the kind of January dark where the headlights only reach far enough to make you feel alone. She was not speeding. She had not been speeding. The sedan held steady at 53 miles per hour in a 55 zone, blinker used at every turn, both hands on the wheel. She was thinking about her mother's kitchen, the specific smell of Eleanor's cornbread when it had been in the oven 20 minutes, the sound the screen door made when it hadn't been oiled since spring. She had not been home in 4 months. She had promised herself this trip since February, and kept finding reasons to postpone it. She saw the blue lights in her rearview mirror at 6:43. Her body did what bodies do before the mind catches up. Shoulders went tight. Hands adjusted on the wheel. She checked her speed, 53, and pulled to the shoulder the way she had been taught, smooth and slow, both hands visible. She sat with the window down and her license and registration already in her hand by the time the footsteps reached the door. Deputy Derek Holt was 6'2", and built like a man who had spent his 30s believing size was authority. He wore the uniform the way some men wear a suit, not as clothing, but as argument. He walked to her window and stood half a step back, the way officers are trained to stand, and looked at her for a long moment before he said anything at all. What he said first was not a greeting. Out of the car. Maya kept her voice even. "May I ask the reason for the stop, officer?" I said, "Out of the car. Move like the dog you are." The words landed in the evening air and sat there. Maya's jaw tightened. Her hands, still holding the license and registration, did not move. "I haven't broken any law. I'm happy to comply if you can tell me." Did I stutter? She got out of the car. He grabbed her arm before both feet were on the gravel, spun her toward the hood with one motion, her cheek hitting warm metal. Both wrists pulled behind her back. She felt the gravel under her shoes, the heat still rising off the hood from the engine, the particular hardness of his grip, the kind that doesn't ask anything, that has already decided. 3 cars passed on Route 9. Every one of them slowed. Every one of them kept driving. "You stole this car," Holt said behind her. "Women like you don't drive cars like this. It's registered in my name." I don't care what your crackhead mama named you. He wrenched her wrists higher. Pain shot from both shoulders to her fingertips. Resisting arrest, obstruction, failure to comply. I haven't resisted anything. You opened your mouth. One more click on the cuffs. That's resistance enough. He walked her to the cruiser, shoved her head down into the back seat with a hand that knew exactly where to push. She folded herself in without another word, spine straight, eyes forward, and the door closed and the light changed from copper to the hard white of the cruiser's interior, and she sat with her wrists burning behind her and made herself breathe through her nose, slow and counted, 4 counts in and 4 counts out, the way she had trained herself to breathe in rooms where losing composure was the one thing she could not afford. She did not cry. She was far past crying. At the Colton County Sheriff's Department, Holt walked her through booking the way a man walks something he has caught. Fingerprints pressed into ink. Mugshot under fluorescent light that turned everything green at the edges. 2 deputies at the front desk looked up, looked at Maya, looked at Holt, looked back at what they were doing. Caught her swerving on Route 9, Holt announced to the bullpen, loud enough that it carried to 3 desks. Got mouthy, real mouthy. You know how they get. One deputy chuckled into his coffee. The sound was small and practiced and hollow. Maya stood in front of the booking camera with her hands cuffed and her spine straight and her eyes level with the lens. The flash went off. She did not blink. They held her for 4 hours. The charges filed were resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, failure to comply with a lawful order. Every word of it fiction. Every word of it typed into a department system in 12 minutes by a man who did not once check his own dash cam before submitting. They released her at 10:51 at night. She walked out of the station into the Georgia dark. The air smelled like red clay and cut grass, and the particular coolness that comes off Georgia fields after a day of heat has finally let go. The parking lot lights hummed at a frequency just below conscious thought. She stood under one of them for a full minute with the plastic bag of her belongings in one hand. Phone, keys, the leather briefcase they had let her keep in processing, and she did not move. Her wrists had marks from the cuffs, purple already, darkening at the edges. She looked at them in the parking lot light, the way a doctor looks at an X-ray, clinically, inventorying the damage, filing it away. Then she took out her phone. She did not call anyone. She did not open her contacts or her messages. She opened a browser and typed 2 words into the search bar, FOIA request. She read for 11 minutes standing under that parking lot light. Then she got into her car, drove the 6 miles to her mother's house on Sycamore Street, went to the kitchen table, opened her laptop, and began. The arrest report was already in the system. She found it in 11 minutes. 3 charges: resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, failure to comply with a lawful order. She read it twice, then a 3rd time, the way you read something when you are looking for the specific distance between what is written and what is true. The distance was total. She screenshot the report, saved it to 2 separate folders, opened a new tab and filed her first FOIA request. Dashcam footage from Unit 714, Deputy Derek Holt's assigned patrol vehicle, recorded between 6:30 and 7:15 on the evening of her arrest. Then she filed a second one, body cam footage from the same officer, same window. Then a 3rd. Every traffic stop conducted by Deputy Derek Holt on Route 9 in the previous 3 years. She worked until 4 in the morning. The house was quiet around her. Eleanor's cat moved through the kitchen once, jumping onto the chair beside her and sitting there with the particular self-containment of old cats, watching her work without comment. The shelves behind her were lined with law books, thick ones, dog-eared at the corners, organized by Federal Circuit. Her mother had dusted them that morning, the way she dusted them every week, even though Maya hadn't lived in this house in 20 years. At 4:17 in the morning, Eleanor appeared in the doorway. 78 years old, still in the same floral robe she'd had since Maya was in law school, her reading glasses pushed up on her head like a crown she'd forgotten she was wearing. She looked at her daughter, at the laptop, at the bruises on both wrists visible under the kitchen light. She pressed her lips together in a way that didn't need words. The way women press their lips together when they have spent a lifetime swallowing a very specific kind of rage so that the people they love don't have to carry it. "You're not letting this go," Eleanor said. "No, Mama." Eleanor looked at the wrists again. One long look. Then she went to the freezer, took out a bag of frozen peas, brought it to the table, and set it down beside the laptop without a word. She stood there another moment, with her hand resting on Maya's shoulder. "Be careful," she said. Maya looked up at her. "I'm past careful." Eleanor nodded once, the nod of a woman who understood exactly what that meant, and who had raised a daughter who meant it completely. She went back to her room. The door clicked shut. Maya put the frozen peas across both wrists, felt the cold bite down through the bruising, and kept typing. Back at his desk in the Colton County Sheriff's Department, Derek Holt leaned back in his chair and cracked open a soda. He pulled up the incident report on his terminal, read through what he had typed, and submitted it without a second thought. He didn't check the dashcam footage. He didn't pull up the body cam file. He had filed reports like this one, small variations of this same exact report, more times than he could accurately count. The system had accepted every one of them. He finished his soda. He went home. He slept fine. 38 years earlier, the summer Maya Underwood was 14 years old. A man named Roosevelt Briggs didn't come home from a traffic stop 2 counties south of Colton. He had been driving home from a hardware store on a Thursday afternoon, broad daylight. His wife called the sheriff's department at 7 that evening when the sun went down and he still wasn't back. They found his car on the shoulder of Highway 41, driver's door open, engine off, groceries still on the back seat, a bag of roofing nails he'd bought for the porch he was building that weekend, a receipt from the hardware store, time-stamped 2:47 in the afternoon. Roosevelt Briggs was never found. No charges filed. No investigation opened. The sheriff's department logged it as an abandoned vehicle and a missing person report that went cold inside of 6 weeks. James Underwood heard about it at church on Sunday. He drove home in silence, which was not like him. He ate dinner in silence, which was also not like him. After the dishes were cleared, he told Eleanor to take the children and go sit on the porch. Then he sat at the kitchen table alone for a long time, with his hands flat on the surface, looking at nothing. The next morning, he took both of his children to the shop. James Underwood's machine shop sat at the edge of the Underwood property on a half-acre of red Georgia clay, a corrugated steel building that smelled of motor oil and iron filings and the specific dry heat that metal holds long after the afternoon sun has moved on. He had built it himself over 3 summers in his late 20s, one wall at a time, and everything in it was organized with the precision of a man who understood that a misplaced tool in the wrong moment cost more than time. Elias was 19 that summer, already big across the shoulders, already quiet in the particular way he would be quiet for the rest of his life. Maya was 14. She sat on an upturned crate beside her brother, while their father stood at his workbench with his back to them, hands moving over the surface of something he was repairing. He didn't turn around when he started talking. Roosevelt Briggs had a wife, James said, 3 kids. He was building a porch. He set down whatever was in his hands. He's gone now, and nobody is going to do anything about it. The shop was quiet, except for the tin roof ticking in the heat. James turned around. He looked at his son first, then his daughter, with the eyes of a man measuring something. "There are going to be times," he said, "when you can't make noise. When making noise makes it worse. When the only thing you can do is let someone who is already watching know that you need them." He crossed to the workbench on the far wall, picked up a length of iron pipe, set it on the steel surface between them. Then he placed his right hand flat on the pipe and knocked 3 times. A pause of exactly 1 breath, 1 knock more. The sound rang in the metal walls of the shop and faded. 3, he said. "Stop, 1. He looked at Elias. Elias put his hand on the pipe and did it. 3 knocks. A breath's pause. 1 knock. The pipe rang. James looked at Maya. She put her hand on the pipe. 3 knocks. She counted the pause the way her father had paused, measured to exactly 1 breath, no more, no less. 1 knock. "If either of you ever does that where I can hear it," James said, "I come. No questions first. Whatever I'm doing, I stop. I come." He looked at both of them. "And if I can't hear it, if you do it where your brother can hear it, or your sister can hear it, they come. Same thing. No questions." Maya looked at the pipe, at the marks her knuckles had left in the thin layer of dust on the surface. "What if they can't come either?" she asked. James was quiet for a moment. "Then you've taught it to the wrong people," he said. "So make sure you teach it to the right ones." He went back to his work. The lesson was over. Maya sat on the upturned crate for another few minutes after Elias drifted back outside, looking at the workbench, at the iron pipe still sitting on the steel surface, at the way the afternoon light came through the one high window and turned the dust motes gold as it moved through the space where the sound had been. She didn't think she would ever need it. She was 14 years old and Colton was home, and her father was 10 feet away, and the world outside the shop felt very far from the inside of it. She nodded, the way children nod when they are filing something away in a place they don't expect to open again. She was wrong about that. She would open it again 38 years later, in courtroom 4B of the Colton County Courthouse, on a Thursday morning in front of a judge and a polished badge, and 23 men in leather vests, who had driven 40 minutes from Colton at 6 in the morning, because one of them had gotten a phone call the night before. 4 words. She needs a witness. The FOIA responses started arriving within the week. The dashcam footage came first. Maya watched it at the kitchen table at 7 in the morning, with a cup of coffee going cold beside her, and the sound turned all the way up. 38 seconds of footage. Her sedan centered in the lane, speed steady, blinker used at every turn. The camera mounted directly behind her vehicle, standard department position, the same position Holt had used as evidence in 11 previous cases. No swerving, no erratic movement. The car drove like it was on rails. She watched it twice. Then she saved it to 3 separate folders and opened the next file. The body cam footage arrived 3 days later. She watched that one standing up, because she had known what was coming and had decided she would rather be on her feet for it. The audio was clean. Every word Holt had said, dog, animal, crackhead, roaches, captured in department-issued high definition, his voice casual, the way a voice gets when it has said the same things so many times, they have stopped feeling like cruelty and started feeling like weather, just the conditions of a particular kind of day. She saved that file to 4 folders. Then she went deeper. Holt's personnel file was redacted in the places that mattered, but the complaint records were not entirely. 11 formal complaints in 14 years. Every single complainant a person of color. Every single complaint closed by internal affairs with the same paragraph of boilerplate language. Insufficient evidence to substantiate the allegation at this time. Copy, paste, next. She found their names. Called them one by one from the list she had built on a yellow legal pad, the phone pressed to her ear at the kitchen table, while Eleanor moved through the kitchen without sound, making coffee, watering the plant by the window, giving her daughter the particular gift of presence without interruption. Denise Carver answered on the second ring. 23 years old, voice careful in the way voices get careful when a stranger calls about something painful. She had been pulled over on Route 9 2 years ago. Same road, same charges. She had tried to fight it, hired a public defender who told her the math didn't work in her favor, and pled guilty to obstruction to avoid the risk of a felony trial against a decorated officer. "Nobody believed me," Denise said. His word had a badge on it and mine didn't. She had lost her job at the elementary school. Failed the background check for the teaching assistant position she had held for 14 months. The first person in her family to work in a school. She said this last part quietly, the way people say things they have had to learn to say out loud without breaking. Maya wrote her name on the legal pad. Drew a line connecting it to Holt's name at the top of the page. Tamara Bridges didn't pick up. She texted back 4 words. "I can't. I'm sorry." Gerald Porter called her back the same afternoon. 61 years old, retired history teacher, Vietnam veteran, 3 stops in 18 months on Route 9, all Holt. The third stop, Holt had made him kneel on the shoulder of the road in front of passing traffic while he searched the car. "I'm a 61-year-old man," Gerald said. "I served this country, and he made me kneel on asphalt in front of people I go to church with." His hands had shaken when he said it. 20 months later, they still shook when the memory came up. Maya could hear it in the silences between his sentences, the specific tremor of a dignity that had been violated in public and had never fully stopped feeling the exposure. She wrote his name below Denise's, drew the line. By the end of 2 weeks, she had 9 FOIA responses, 47 pages of complaint records, 3 witnesses willing to speak on record, and a spreadsheet that mapped 214 traffic stops across a 12-mile corridor of Route 9. Of those 214 stops, 201 had involved drivers who were black or Hispanic, 94%, in a county that was 63% white. She printed the map on a Thursday afternoon at the Colton Public Library on the printer that cost 15 cents a page and took 3 minutes per sheet. The red dots clustered so thick along that stretch of Route 9 that the road itself disappeared beneath them. She looked at it for a long time. Then she filed to represent herself, pro se. No attorney, no legal team, just the evidence and the room. Denise Carver came to the house on a Saturday. She sat at Eleanor's kitchen table with both hands around a coffee mug and told Maya everything she remembered, every detail, every word Holt had used, the exact way he had leaned into her window and told her she smelled like food stamps. Eleanor sat at the end of the table and listened, and did not say a word, and at one point reached over and put her hand over Denise's hand and left it there. Gerald Porter came Sunday, navy blue suit, slightly tight across the shoulders, the one he'd worn to his retirement dinner. He sat across from Maya with his hands clasped on the table and spoke in the measured cadence of a man who had spent decades teaching young people how to hold difficult truths without dropping them. When he finished, Maya closed her notebook. "I need you to say that in court," she said. Gerald looked at her. At the legal pad. At the 6 labeled folders already arranged on the table in front of her. "Will it matter?" he asked. The question was genuine. The kind of genuine that comes from having asked a version of it many times before and received many versions of the same non-answer. "Yes," Maya said. He looked at her for another moment. "All right," he said. "Then I'll be there." The night before the hearing, Maya sat at the kitchen table until 11:47. Eleanor had gone to bed at 9. The house was quiet, except for the refrigerator's hum and the distant sound of a dog somewhere on Sycamore Street, finding something worth barking at briefly, and then letting go. Her phone rang at 11:52. Elias. She picked up on the second ring. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. No greeting. Straight to it. The way he had always been straight to things. "I know. I can have people there. I know that too." A pause. The specific pause of a brother who has learned over many decades that his sister means what she says and says what she means, and that the space between her words is worth wading through. "How many folders?" he asked. 6. Another pause. Shorter this time. "He won't know what hit him," Elias said. "That's the idea." She heard him exhale. Not quite a laugh. Something adjacent to it. The sound a person makes when they are proud of someone and have no clean way to say it that doesn't sound like more than it is. "I'll be in the front row," he said. "I know. Maya. Elias." The silence between them held everything 40 years of siblings holds. The metal shop and the iron pipe and their father's hands, and Roosevelt Briggs, and 14 years of a back road being used as a hunting ground, and 4 hours in a holding cell, and a parking lot, and a bag of frozen peas and a laptop open at 4 in the morning. All of it sitting in the quiet of a phone call at 11:52 at night, on Sycamore Street in Colton, Georgia. 3, he said. A pause. 1 breath. 1, she answered. She hung up, sat for a moment with the phone, face down on the table beside the 6 folders. Then she went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, looked at herself in the mirror for exactly as long as she needed to, and went to bed. She slept 4 hours and 20 minutes. In the morning, she pressed her navy blazer, packed her briefcase, and drove to the Colton County Courthouse. She arrived at 8:15, 45 minutes early. She chose the defendant's table on the left side, closer to where the jury box would be if there were a jury, unclasped her briefcase with both hands, and arranged 6 tabbed folders in a precise row on the table in front of her. Each one labeled, each one numbered, each one containing something Derek Holt did not know existed. And in courtroom 4B, in the front row of the gallery, at 8:41 in the morning, Elias Underwood sat down. He did not look at his sister. She did not look at him. They didn't need to. At exactly 9 o'clock, the bailiff stood. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Patricia Caldwell presiding. Caldwell entered from the side door. Mid-60s, silver hair pulled back tight, reading glasses on a beaded chain. She moved with the deliberate pace of someone who had spent decades measuring the weight of every word before allowing it into a room. She took her seat, opened the case file, adjusted her glasses. Case number 2024, CR 4417, The People versus Maya Underwood. Charges: resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, failure to comply with a lawful order. She looked up, scanned the room. Her eyes moved across the gallery, the 23 men in leather vests sitting in absolute stillness, and registered something without naming it. Then she looked at the defendant's table. Ms. Underwood, you've elected to represent yourself, pro se. Is that correct? Maya stood. Yes, Your Honor. You understand you will be held to the same legal standards as any licensed attorney in this courtroom. I do, Your Honor. Caldwell studied her for a moment. Something moved behind the judge's eyes. Recognition. The specific kind that comes from seeing something deeply familiar in another person's posture. She filed it away without a flicker. Mr. Beckett, you may proceed. Thomas Beckett buttoned his jacket and walked to the center of the courtroom like a man stepping onto a stage he had owned for 30 years. He was good, smooth in the particular way that expensive preparation produces. No wasted motion, no unnecessary word, the kind of confidence that fills a room before the argument does. He laid out the prosecution's case in 11 minutes. Deputy Holt observed a vehicle exhibiting erratic behavior on Route 9. He initiated a lawful traffic stop. The defendant became combative and non-compliant. Appropriate force was used to effect a lawful arrest. Standard procedure. By the book. He said those last 3 words with the finality of a door closing. When he sat down, he turned to Maya with a small, polite nod. The nod of a man who has already calculated the outcome and found it satisfactory. Maya did not nod back. She opened her first folder. Beckett called his only witness. Derek Holt walked to the stand in full-dress uniform, badge polished, every crease pressed sharp. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, with the ease of a man who had done it many times in rooms like this, and had never once felt the weight of the words. Beckett guided him through it. Softball after softball. Holt's voice stayed level, practiced, the specific flatness of testimony that has been rehearsed until it sounds unrehearsed. Deputy Holt, can you describe what you observed on Route 9 on the evening in question? I observed a vehicle traveling erratically, swerving across the center line. I initiated a stop for the safety of other motorists. And how did the defendant respond? Immediately combative, aggressive tone, refused to produce identification. I determined she posed a potential threat and placed her under arrest per department protocol. No further questions, Your Honor. Caldwell turned to the defendant's table. Ms. Underwood, you may cross-examine. Maya stood. She picked up a single sheet of paper from the first folder and walked to the center of the courtroom. She carried no legal pad. Her hands were steady. Her voice, when she spoke, filled the room without rising above conversation level. The particular projection of someone who had learned that a room listens harder to quiet than to volume. Deputy Holt, you testified that you observed my vehicle swerving across the center line. Those were your words under oath? That's correct, Your Honor. Maya turned to the bench. I'd like to submit Defense Exhibit A. Dashcam footage from Unit 714, Deputy Holt's assigned patrol vehicle, recorded on the date and during the time window in question. Obtained via FOIA request to the Colton County Sheriff's Department. Beckett's pen stopped moving. Caldwell nodded. Proceed. The courtroom monitor flickered to life. 38 seconds of footage. Maya's sedan centered perfectly in the lane. Speed consistent. Blinker engaged at every turn. The camera angle direct, unobstructed, mounted in the standard position Holt's department had used as evidence in court 41 times in the previous 3 years. The footage ended. The room was quiet. Maya turned back to Holt. Deputy, can you point out the swerving for the court? Holt's jaw tightened. The dashcam doesn't always capture. The angle can. The angle is directly behind my vehicle. It's your department's standard mounting position. You have submitted footage from this same camera as evidence in previous cases, have you not? I have, yes. So the camera functions when it supports your testimony, and develops technical limitations when it doesn't. Objection. Beckett was on his feet. Argumentative. Overruled. Caldwell's voice was dry. The witness will answer. Holt's hands gripped the armrest. The camera captured what it captured. I know what I observed. Maya nodded once. Let the silence sit for 3 full seconds. Then she set the sheet of paper on the evidence rail and picked up another. Deputy Holt, you testified that I was, and I'm quoting your words under oath, immediately combative. Is that your testimony? It is. Your Honor. Defense Exhibit B. Body cam footage from Deputy Holt's department-issued camera. Same date, same window. Also obtained via FOIA. This time Beckett did more than stop writing. He turned to look at Holt. Something moved across his face. The rapid arithmetic of a man recalculating odds he had considered settled. Holt had gone still. The kind of still that is not calm. He had not reviewed the body cam footage before walking into this courtroom. The monitor lit up again. This time with audio. Move like the dog you are. The gallery shifted. Not loudly. The specific collective movement of 23 people absorbing something simultaneously. Get your black ass out of this vehicle. In the 3rd row, Denise Carver closed her eyes. Animals don't ask questions. Gerald Porter's hands gripped his knees. I don't care what your crackhead mama named you. You people breed like roaches. A woman in the 2nd row pressed both hands over her mouth. One of the 3 deputies in the back corner stood up and walked out. The door closed behind him with a sound like a period at the end of a very long sentence. On the stand, Holt's face had gone the color of old wax, the blood leaving in stages, cheeks first, then the neck, then the hands on the armrests. His own voice filling the courtroom from a speaker 8 feet away, casual and bored, the voice of a man saying things he had said so many times they had stopped requiring effort. Maya waited until the last echo faded. Then she spoke. Deputy Holt. Which part of that footage shows me being combative? Silence. Which part shows me resisting arrest? Silence. Which part shows me doing anything other than standing still, answering your questions, and asking for your badge number? Holt opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Beckett stood. Your Honor, I'd like to request a brief recess. Denied. Caldwell did not look up from her notes. Ms. Underwood, continue. Maya's voice dropped. The room leaned in to catch it. You called me a dog, deputy. You called me an animal. You compared human beings to roaches. On camera. On a department-issued device. While wearing that badge. She pointed at his chest. At the badge that still caught the fluorescent light, still threw its small, bright point on the ceiling. That badge you polished this morning. It recorded everything. Holt stared at her. Said nothing. She returned to her table. Stay with me. Because what came next was the part Beckett would spend the following years trying to explain away in private practice. Maya called Denise Carver to the stand. Denise walked up with her hands clasped and her chin level, the specific composure of someone who has decided that, if they are going to do this, they are going to do it standing up straight. She placed her hand on the Bible. Her voice cracked on the word truth, then steadied. She told her story. The stop on Route 9, the slurs, different words, same venom, the fabricated charges, the public defender who told her the math didn't work, the guilty plea she took to avoid a felony trial she couldn't afford to lose. I lost my job, Denise said. Failed the background check. I was a teaching assistant, first in my family to work in a school. Her voice broke on that last sentence. She pressed the heel of her hand against her eye, did not look away from Maya. He took that from me with a lie. The gallery was grave still. Gerald Porter came next. He walked to the stand with his back straight and his hands clasped in front of him, the posture of a man who learned it in the military and never lost it. He sat down, looked at Maya, and told the court about the 3rd stop, about Holt making him kneel on the shoulder of Route 9 in front of passing traffic, about the people from his church driving past. He told me to get on my knees, Gerald said. I'm a 61-year-old Vietnam veteran, and he made me kneel on asphalt in front of people I go to church with every Sunday. His hands shook on the witness rail. He looked at them for a moment, then back up. He just wanted me down, Gerald said. That's all it was. Beckett objected twice during Gerald's testimony. Caldwell overruled him both times without looking up. Maya submitted Defense Exhibit C, the spreadsheet. 214 traffic stops, 201 involving minority drivers, 94%. In a county that was 63% white, 63 arrests, 58 plea deals. Caldwell took the page. Read it. Her reading glasses came off. She held the paper closer to the light. Then she set it down and looked at Holt for the first time since the trial began. The long, specific look of a woman who has just found exactly what she suspected she would find. Beckett tried to recover. He stood and addressed the court with the measured tone of a man who still believed he could steer a sinking ship. The language used, while regrettable in tone, does not negate the legal basis for the stop. The dashcam angle presents interpretive challenges. The pattern of stops reflects high crime corridor enforcement, not discriminatory targeting. Maya let him finish. Let the words regrettable in tone sit in the room like a stain nobody wanted to name. Then she stood for the last time. She buttoned her blazer, picked up nothing from the table, walked to the center of the courtroom and stood where Beckett had stood 3 hours earlier. Except she did not stand the way Beckett had stood. Beckett had performed. Maya planted. She reached into her briefcase slowly. The leather clasp made a sound in the silence like a door opening. She removed a dark brown case, worn soft at the edges, the initials MU, barely visible on the front. She opened it and held it toward Judge Caldwell. Not toward Holt, not toward Beckett. Toward the bench. A federal judicial identification card. Gold seal, blue lettering. A photograph of the woman standing in the center of the courtroom. The Honorable Maya Underwood, United States District Judge, Northern District of Georgia. The room stopped. Denise Carver's hand flew to her mouth. Gerald Porter closed his eyes and nodded once, slowly, deeply. The nod of a man who has just watched something he had quietly prayed for become real. Beckett stared at the card, then at Maya, then at the card. His mouth opened, closed, opened. His $420 an hour briefcase sat in front of him like a prop from a play that had just been rewritten mid-act. Holt did not move. His eyes were locked on the card. The color had drained from his face so completely, he looked like something carved from candle wax. His lips moved, forming a shape that might have been a word, but nothing came out. In the front row of the gallery, Elias Underwood looked at his sister for the first time all morning. He said nothing. He made no gesture. He simply looked at her the way an older brother looks at something his little sister has done that he always knew she was going to do. Maya lowered the card. "I am on sabbatical from the bench," she said. Her voice was steady in the way that something is steady when it has been tested enough times to know its own weight. "I was driving to visit my mother in Colton when Deputy Holt decided my presence on Route 9 required his intervention." She turned to face Holt directly. "I could have identified myself on the shoulder of that road. I could have ended this in 30 seconds. I had every credential and every connection to make that stop disappear before the cuffs went on." She paused. "I chose not to, because Denise Carver didn't have those credentials. Gerald Porter didn't have them. The 58 people who pled guilty to crimes they did not commit because they could not afford to fight a man with a badge, they did not have them." She pointed at his chest one final time. "If justice only works when you already have power, it isn't justice. It's a privilege." She returned to her table and sat down. The courtroom stayed silent for 11 seconds. Gerald Porter counted them. He would tell people about those 11 seconds for the rest of his life. Caldwell picked up her pen. She had not rushed. She had sat with the evidence the way she sat with everything that mattered. Long enough to be certain, not so long that certainty became delay. Her reading glasses were back on. The courtroom had been quiet for 11 seconds, and then 11 more, and nobody had moved to break it, because the room understood without being told that something was being measured here, and that the measurement required silence. "The court has reviewed all evidence submitted in this proceeding," she said. Her voice had the particular quality of water moving over stone. Steady, measured, inevitable. The dashcam footage submitted as Defense Exhibit A directly contradicts the arresting officer's sworn testimony regarding erratic driving. The body cam footage submitted as Defense Exhibit B documents conduct this court finds not merely inappropriate, but deliberately dehumanizing, carried out by a sworn officer of the law against a compliant civilian. She paused. The testimony of witnesses Carver and Porter, taken together with the statistical analysis submitted as Defense Exhibit C, establishes a pattern of discriminatory enforcement that this court cannot characterize as coincidental, contextual, or the product of honest error. She looked at Holt. He looked back at her. His badge still caught the fluorescent light. The small bright point it threw on the ceiling had not moved. All charges against Ms. Underwood are dismissed. She set her pen down, picked it back up. Furthermore, this court is referring Deputy Holt's conduct to the Colton County Internal Affairs Division and to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Civil Rights Division for investigation under 18 United States Code Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. The gavel came down once. Clean. Final. The sound moved through the old oak walls and settled into the bones of every person in the room. Denise Carver was crying. She made no sound. The tears moved down her face and she let them, her hands flat on her knees, her chin up, her eyes on the bench. Gerald Porter had his right hand over his heart. He held it there the way a veteran holds his hand during an anthem. Not performance, just the specific weight of a feeling that has no other place to go. In the back corner, the two remaining deputies sat motionless with their eyes on the floor. Beckett closed his briefcase with both hands, the latches clicking in the silence, and did not look at his client. Holt sat at the plaintiff's table with his hands flat on the surface, fingers slightly spread, the posture of a man bracing for turbulence that has already arrived. His badge still gleamed. His uniform was still pressed, every crease still sharp. But the thing behind his eyes, the certainty that had lived there for 14 years, the absolute immunity of a man who had never once been held to account for anything, that was gone. He would spend a long time learning how to exist without it. The story left the courtroom before Maya did. A 19-year-old who had been sitting in the second row, a cousin of Denise Carver's who had driven 40 minutes to be there and had filmed the body cam playback on her phone through the courtroom monitor, posted the clip that evening. By midnight, it had 400 views. By the following morning, it had been picked up by a journalist in Atlanta who filed a second round of FOIA requests before noon. By that evening, the dashcam and body cam footage were on every local news station in Georgia. By the morning after that, they were national. Move like the dog you are. The clip played on cable news, on breakfast shows, on every platform that carried sound. 9 words delivered by a man in uniform to a woman on a back road, followed by the revelation that the woman he had called an animal was a sitting United States federal judge on sabbatical. The internet did what it does with things it cannot put down. 4 words emerged from the noise and stayed, not from the footage. From the courtroom, someone in the gallery had filmed the moment Maya held up the judicial ID card, and in the background of that clip, barely audible, you could hear a man in the second row say it under his breath, the way people say things when they have forgotten they are in public. Wrong woman. 4 words became a hashtag. The hashtag became a headline. The headline ran for 3 days. Colton County Sheriff Eugene Bradshaw held a press conference 48 hours after the verdict. He stood behind a podium with the department seal, read from a prepared statement, took no questions, and was visibly sweating through his collar when he walked off stage. Deputy Holt had been placed on administrative leave pending a full internal investigation. The department did not condone discriminatory conduct in any form. The FBI moved faster than the department expected. Within 6 days, agents from the Civil Rights Division arrived in Colton with subpoenas, personnel records, shift logs, every complaint file the department had spent 14 years burying under boilerplate language. What they found was worse than what Maya had built in 2 weeks at her mother's kitchen table. 23 confirmed civil rights violations tied directly to Holt. Illegal searches, falsified reports dating back to his second year on the force. In 2 cases, evidence that had not been where the report said it had been found. The complaint system had not failed. It had functioned exactly as it was designed, as a firewall between officers and accountability. 6 arrests were overturned. Denise Carver was one of them. She called Maya the afternoon the letter arrived, her voice doing something complicated, shaking at the edges of words that were trying to carry more weight than words were built for. "They cleared it," she said. "My record. It's gone." "I know," Maya said. A silence. "I can apply again. For the school." "I know." Another silence. The kind that doesn't need filling because what's in it is already full. Gerald Porter's 3 stops were classified as civil rights violations. He received a formal letter of apology from the Colton County Sheriff's Department. A single-page, county letterhead, signed by Bradshaw in blue ink. It had taken 14 months to produce. Gerald framed it and hung it on the wall of his study next to his military discharge papers, and his 30-year teaching certificate. He told his daughter it wasn't forgiveness. It was documentation. There was a difference, and the difference mattered. Tamara Bridges, the woman who had texted Maya the morning of the hearing, "I can't, but I'm praying for you," filed her own complaint 8 weeks after the verdict. First complaint she had ever filed. Her 2 children, 7 and 9 years old, would not grow up with the memory of their mother being silenced on the side of a road and choosing to stay silent afterward. They would grow up knowing she had stood up, in her own time, on her own terms. Derek Holt was indicted on federal charges 4 months after the verdict. 4 counts, 18 United States Code, Section 242, maximum penalty 10 years per count. His badge was confiscated in the parking lot of the Colton County Sheriff's Department at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning, in front of 2 FBI agents and a department administrator. No press, no cameras, no audience. He handed it over without a word. The badge that had made him untouchable. The one he had polished every morning. The one he had pointed at Maya on the shoulder of Route 9 and told her it made him God. It sat in the administrator's open palm, small, dull in the flat morning light. Just a piece of metal that had meant something to a man who had never deserved to carry it. Beckett resigned from the police union's legal team 3 weeks later. No public statement. His LinkedIn profile was updated within the hour. Private practice. Personal injury. The Colton County Sheriff's Department announced mandatory body cam activation protocols, quarterly bias audits, and an independent civilian review board, the first in the county's history. The new mandatory training module for all deputies was titled Constitutional Policing and the Consequences of Abuse. The first slide showed a photograph of Route 9. The night after the verdict, Maya sat on the front porch of her mother's house on Sycamore Street. The Georgia evening was doing what it does in late spring. Warm but not heavy. The kind of air that carries the smell of cut grass and red clay, and something blooming 2 yards over that she had never been able to identify and had stopped trying to. Eleanor had left the porch light off. The dark was comfortable. She heard the Harley before she saw it. The engine note of a specific bike she had known since she was 19 years old, when Elias had bought it used from a man outside Macon, with money he had saved for 8 months. She could pick that engine out of a line of 40. He came around the corner of Sycamore at low speed, cut the engine at the curb, and sat for a moment in the dark before he got off. He came up the porch steps the same way he had always come up porch steps, without announcement, without ceremony, the way big men move when they have learned that their size already announces them and that anything added to it is surplus. He sat in the other chair, the one that had been their father's chair. He had been sitting in it since James died, and he sat in it now, the way he always did. Not filling it exactly, but occupying it in a way that made it make sense. Neither of them spoke for a while. The dog 2 yards over found something in the dark and barked at it twice and let it go. Elias looked at his hands. He had their father's hands, wide across the knuckles, the particular roughness of someone who had worked with metal for 30 years. He turned them over once, then set them on his knees. "You didn't need us," he said. It was an observation, the way he made observations. Flat, no accusation in it, just the fact of the thing. "I needed you there," Maya said. He thought about that. "That's different," he said. "Yes." Another silence. Longer. The kind that 2 people can sit in when they have known each other for 50 years and have learned that the silence between them is not empty. Elias reached over to the small table between the chairs, the wicker one their mother had kept there since before either of them could remember, and set his hand flat on the surface. 3 knocks. A breath's pause. 1 more. Maya looked at his hand. At the table. At the dark yard beyond the porch where their father had taught them to throw a baseball, and to change a tire, and to read the sky before rain. She put her hand beside his on the table. 3 knocks. A pause. 1. Elias stood up. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. He came down the porch steps, crossed the yard to the curb, got on the bike, and started the engine. The sound of it moved through the quiet street of Sycamore, past the houses with their lights on and their lives going, and then it rounded the corner and was gone. Maya sat in the dark for a long time after. Her hand still rested on the wicker table. There is a version of this story that ends with a badge on a table and a man in handcuffs and a number on a federal indictment. That version is true. Every detail of it. But the version that stays, the one that lingers past the verdict and the press conference and the hashtag that ran for 3 days, is smaller than all of that. It is a woman sitting alone at a kitchen table at 4 in the morning with a bag of frozen peas across her wrists and a laptop open and nowhere to be except exactly where she was. It is a man in a metal shop turning around and placing his hand on a steel surface and knocking 3 times, waiting 1 breath, knocking once more. It is a 14-year-old girl watching, filing it away in a place she didn't expect to open again. It is the 38 years between that moment and the one where she needed it. People talk about justice like it arrives, like it shows up one day fully formed, announced, with a gavel and a verdict, and a clean ending. What Maya Underwood understood, what she had spent 20 years on a federal bench learning to see, is that justice doesn't arrive. It is built. It is built in FOIA requests filed at midnight. It is built in the testimony of a woman who lost a job she loved and showed up anyway. It is built in the specific courage of a 61-year-old veteran who had every reason to stay home and chose to put on his good suit and sit in a witness chair and say what happened to him out loud, in public, under oath, in the county where it happened. It is built in the people who show up before they are asked. 23 of them, in leather vests, at 8:47 in the morning. Derek Holt thought his badge made him untouchable. He was wrong, not because of who Maya Underwood turned out to be, but because of what she chose to do with what had been done to her. The badge was never the point. The certainty behind it was the absolute, practiced assumption that some people's words carry weight and some people's don't, and that the difference has nothing to do with truth. That assumption walked out of courtroom 4B in handcuffs. The 3 cars that passed on Route 9 that evening, the ones that slowed down and kept driving, will never know what they drove past. Most people never do. Most of what happens in the world happens in the space between what we notice and what we choose to do about it. Maya Underwood closed that space. So did Elias Underwood, who drove 40 minutes in the dark because 4 words were enough. Who sat in the front row of a courtroom and didn't move, and didn't speak, and didn't need to. So did Denise Carver, who answered on the second ring. So did Gerald Porter, who pressed his hand over his heart when the gavel came down. The signal their father taught them was never about danger. It was about the belief that someone, somewhere, is already watching, already close enough to hear, already willing to come. 3 knocks, a breath, 1 more. That's all it takes, if you've taught it to the right people. Before you go, if you or someone you know has experienced civil rights violations or discriminatory conduct by law enforcement, the ACLU's Know Your Rights hotline is available at 1. It is free. It is confidential. You do not have to be certain. You only have to make the call. If this story stayed with you, if there was a moment, a detail, something you can't quite shake, tell me about it in the comments below. I read every single one. And I want to know, which part hit you hardest? If you're new here, welcome. Heart Tales is where stories like this live. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, in the quietest, most human ways possible. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And before you go, there are 2 more stories waiting for you right now on your screen. I think you'll want to stay. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring enough to make it to the end. That matters more than you know. 1 if you're new, 2 if you've been around, 3 if you never miss.